All right. Welcome. Getting my screen in order here for a moment. All right. So again, if you didn't hear just a moment ago, thank you so much for joining us today. My name is Kelly Choi. I am the grants manager for ArtsFairfax. I'm happy to welcome everybody to the information session for our Project Support Grant program today. We are recording today's session and it will be shared on the website when we're complete, when this is complete for everyone to see. I will share that I am a white woman with mid-length blonde hair. I am wearing a black shirt. My pronouns are she, her. So I want to go ahead and dive into our presentation today and get started. There's a lot for us to share. So to give you an idea of the few things that we will run through today, we have a variety of attendees here, some who are returning grantees and some who I think are new to ArtsFairfax. So we will share a brief overview of our organization, the grant itself, and the process that we will go through to review that grant and to fund that grant. Things that are maybe new or different for this particular cycle, the specific evaluation criteria for the grant, and then look more toward if the grant is awarded, how that process works, the terms and conditions for that. I will also take a few moments to walk through the resources on both our website as well as the Submittable website, which is the platform that we use to collect applications. So we'll walk through those things all together. I will pause in between conversations today to answer questions. And when we do that, you'll be able to unmute yourself if you like. You may also put questions into the chat, and I will try to make sure that I get to those as we're moving along as well. So feel free to put that in while we're talking. All right. So moving forward, a quick share about our full team. We have currently a staff of 9 really fantastic people at ArtsFairfax, including our new president and CEO, Stuart Holt, who joined us this past April. So we're happy to welcome him to the team. As the grants manager, I'm your primary point of contact for the grants application process, but there's many other team members that you might interact with as a grantee, including Manuel and Allison, who are part of our communications team. So they're helping with the website and sharing information and logos and getting information out about your programs. Debbie and Allison, you might work with through Arts Awards and through the development team. They're wonderful. Young is going to help you get paid. So Young is everyone's best friend. Karan is a really, really great resource for our team as an IT guy, but you might not see him that much. And then Shannon, who is on the call today, thank you, Shannon, is our education and community engagement manager. So she also is sharing opportunities for arts organizations to have more professional learning in the area, and that you'll hear more about from her in the next couple months. All right. So just thinking about ArtsFairfax very broadly, we are the designated arts agency for Fairfax County. We're dedicated to expanding support for and access to the arts and culture opportunities in Fairfax County. If you haven't had the opportunity to browse our website, I would encourage you to do so after today's session to see more about what it is we do. In addition to the grants program, which serves somewhere between 60 and 80 arts organizations a year, we have an arts directory, an events calendar, and a public art locator, all things that arts organizations can use and the general public can access on our website to learn more about the opportunities that exist in the county. We're also doing things like posting job calls and artist calls, and like I mentioned, offering professional development for organizations and artists as well. I will take a minute to highlight the artist survey, which is currently open. You might have seen that in another email from us, but we're working on a project to identify the needs and what currently exists in Fairfax County, what artists are doing, and how we might be able to support them in the future. So take a look at that, and let us know how you'd like to engage. So thinking more about the grants programs themselves, we do have 3 primary grant programs that we offer annually. The ticket and participation subsidy grant, the operating support grant, and the one that we're talking about here today, the project support grant. We've just finished the cycle for FY25's operating support grant, or I guess we're kind of midway into that cycle. The application process has just finished. And now we are moving to the start of the project support grant. The ticket subsidy grant itself is more of a rolling grant, so that will continue to be the case in the future. Happy to talk about those other 2 opportunities at another date if you have questions. In general, organizations are eligible to apply for all 3 opportunities, provided they meet the eligibility requirements for each grant. So what I'm saying is applying for one opportunity does not exclude you from applying to the others, if that makes sense. And the eligibility is a tiny bit different between the grant awards, but that affects very few organizations, and I think they know who they are. But if you have questions, please reach out and we can talk further about that. All right. And now getting deeper into project support grant. So the purpose of the project support grant program is to really encourage the development and advancement of the arts in Fairfax County while continuing to serve the artistic and cultural needs of our residents. So we'll talk more about what that looks like in the eligibility and criteria section of the grant, but that's the big picture of what we're aiming to provide. And there's a few goals that fall under that purpose as well. So we want to be able to provide support for established organizations or new organizations. We want to promote opportunities for individual artists and arts organizations in all disciplines to either be able to create, present, or celebrate their artistic endeavors and desires. We aim to be a catalyst for increased private sector support for arts organizations so they can leverage our funding to ask for additional funding as well. And then we want to encourage wide participation in the arts through diverse cultural programming to all residents of Fairfax County. So I want to take a minute with this visual here and give you an outline of the overview of the whole process. Each of these steps we're going to look into a little bit more as we're talking today. So the application, as I mentioned in the initial email, is open right now. I'll talk you through where to find it on the submittable website in a little bit. The first thing that happens is the application deadline at this point, right? So right now, July 15th at 7 p.m., that is a hard deadline. We cannot accept a late application. Immediately after that application closes, the staff will take some time, about a week, to review the application. And again, I'll get more into what we do and don't do a little bit later. But that's a point where you might hear from us if we can't open a document or the link is broken, and we will ask you to kind of provide us an update or clarification, something like that. After the staff reviews, we do convene a panel. We share the applications with the panelists 3 to 4 to 5 weeks ahead of the panel itself, and allow them some time to review applications. The panel is scheduled to take place on August 28th and 29th this year. Once the panel actually meets, we compile a funding scenario that's based off their scores. That scenario is sent to the grants committee for approval, then ultimately the ArtsFairfax board for approval. And then in late September, early October, applicants are notified of the award that is received. All right, so we'll take a couple minutes to talk through the eligibility of organizations to apply. I want to mention two places where you're going to see this as you're pulling your application together. One is that the eligibility is listed out exactly like this in the guidelines document on our website. So if you need to come back, if you want to reference the language here or double check the language that's here, you can find it in the PDF of our guidelines, which I'll point out once we work through this presentation. You'll also see the eligibility questions when you first work in the application in Submittable, and you will be asked to attest to all these things before you can get to the application itself in Submittable. And they're just yes or no questions that will confirm what's written here. So an organization must have a core mission in the creation, exhibition, presentation, production, performance of, and/or education in an arts discipline. And you must be a 501c3 nonprofit or in the process of getting your 501c3 status. A small exception to that would be that you are able to apply with a fiscal sponsor, which we'll get to a little bit further in the presentation as well. But an organization or group can have a fiscal sponsor instead of their 501c3 status as well. You're required to have regular activity in at least 4 months of the year or 120 days of the year. You must present at least 51% of your public art activities within the boundaries of Fairfax County, City of Fairfax, or City of Falls Church. And then the sort of follow-up piece in conjunction with that is that you have to meet one of the other 3 criteria that are spelled out in bullet point number 4 here. So either meeting and rehearsing and operating within this boundary of City of Fairfax, City of Falls Church, and Fairfax County, having 51% of the board of directors that work or reside in that boundary, or verifying that at least 51% of your attendees in performances, exhibitions, activities reside in the boundary that we have identified as well. If you have any questions about those 2 points, about the boundaries and the 51% and whatnot, I'm happy to talk about that based on an individual organization needs whenever you like. So more eligibility, a few other basic things. You must be in compliance with all local, state, federal laws. As I mentioned at the beginning, if you do not hold a 501c3 status, you can apply with a fiscal sponsor that holds a 501c3 status. Again, we'll get to that further in the conversation. An organization also must have independently prepared financial statements. There's a couple different statements that you could include or that would be acceptable. If your organization has expenses above $750,000, you will be asked to provide a full audit. And then last 2 pieces, the applicant must have submitted any prior reports for any ArtsFairfax grants that were received last year. And you must maintain an ArtsFairfax directory listing and update your information on our events calendar. And 2 notes about that. If you're a current grantee from FY24, the final reports are available on Submittable and they are due August 1st of 2024. If you also have been on our website lately, you might know the directory and calendar are in the process of getting an update. So there's some transitions there. If you're having any trouble accessing that, reach out to me or even Shannon afterward, and we can help you. That's happening in conjunction with the artist survey, and it's great progress, but it's a time of transition. So we'll help you through that piece if necessary. All right. So as we talk about the eligibility, one big piece of that section was an organization, having to be in City of Fairfax, City of Falls Church, or Fairfax County. And the way that we identify where an organization is located is through the Virginia 102 form. This is something that most organizations are already required to submit. Not everybody. There's also if you're a very, very small organization, you might have to submit a VA 100 instead. But on this form, you are asked to provide a physical address and a mailing address. And then it has to be signed by people in your organization. So what we're looking for is actually the form itself. To be completed. When you submit the form, you will later get a letter from the state that says it's been finished, but we are looking for a copy of the form that you submitted. That includes your physical address, and the physical address is how we identify that address of record. So this is what it looks like. We have some links both in the application and the guidelines that can take you to this form. And again, if you have questions, I'm happy to talk about it further. Oops, I think I skipped one. Nope, I did. We're good. All right. So in addition to eligible organizations, there's a few qualifications that would make you ineligible for this grant. So any organization that is currently receiving line item funding from the state of Virginia is ineligible. And a Department of George Mason would be ineligible. Also, a nonprofit organization or foundation that sole mission is to support a county agency would be ineligible. And then, of course, a piece that comes with that is if an organization for some reason does not meet the eligibility requirements due to an unusual circumstance, there is a process for confirming eligibility. So we ask that you would submit a written request at least 2 weeks prior to the application deadline to provide a special consideration. And then if that is appropriate, that the grants committee would approve that and allow you to apply for this grant. All right, so I touched on it a couple times at this point. You are able to apply for this grant in conjunction with a fiscal sponsor. And essentially to start the process, and one or two of us have already had a conversation, so to start the process, you're going to email me and let me know that that is something you'd like to do. Ideally, you would let me know at least 2 weeks prior to the deadline, which again is July 15th. Basically, we will ask the fiscal sponsor to collaborate with you on the application. There are some parts of the application that you will use your information for, and some parts that you will use the fiscal sponsor's documentation. So you, the organization, will continue to be the primary point of contact for the grant, but the funds will be managed and processed through your fiscal sponsor. So again, that's something we can talk through step by step on a case-by-case basis. And we've had a couple in the last 2 years. We've had at least one fiscal sponsor applicant for each grant cycle. And I think it works out. So I encourage you to consider that. All right. A couple other basic pieces, just explicit grant restrictions. All project support programs must support activities that are taking place within Fairfax County City of Falls Church, or City of Fairfax. You must have qualified artistic, scholarly, administrative, and management leadership. It can be either professional or volunteer, but you have to demonstrate that this is capable of the grant-supported activities that you're requesting funds for. And the program project must occur within the dates of July 1st, 2024 and June 30th, 2025. And that comes with a small footnote as well. You can request a 2-year grant period now. So if you, in the process of this application, are requesting a 2-year grant period, you could include dates that go into 2026 as well. All right. That's a lot of initial information, and we have made it through a lot of the technical details of eligibility and restrictions and ineligibility. And so I want to pause for a minute for questions. I do see one in the chat. Phoebe asks, she's confused about submitting the final reports. Says, do we need to submit our FY final reports by the 15th, which is the application deadline for project support, if they're applying to project support? And I think you're wondering, like, oh, do I have to have it in the same time as this one so you know I'm done? And the answer is no, you do not. The deadline for the final report is still going to be August 1st. So that is something you can, even if you are applying to this grant, we are still giving you to August 1st to submit that final report. Any other questions so far? If you would like to unmute yourself, you are welcome to do so. Put something in the chat. Does this grant pertain to individual artists? I see a question. It can if you have a fiscal sponsor, as I understand it, or if you have an organization to go through. And if that is a tricky line sometimes. So it might sort of depend on the scenario that you're proposing. But it would have to be with a fiscal sponsor or a 501c3. Any other questions? I will go on for the moment. Please continue to ask questions in the chat as we continue through the conversation. Let's see. All right. Oh, I paused one page too soon for the grant restrictions. There are a few other specified restrictions within our guidelines that I want to read through very quickly. Any fundraising activities cannot be included in the project support. Construction, renovation costs. You may not include the cost of political advocacy. Activities that are not open to the public. However, that comes with a note that activities that are taking place in the schools are considered open to the public. And I know there's a large group of arts and education applicants. So those, again, if it's taking place in the school, it is considered open to the general public. You cannot use project support for debt retirement or pre-grant cost or any faith-based activities. All right. So moving into the categories for the project support grant, there are 4 categories for which you can choose to apply. It's not uncommon that you write a grant application and then feel like it fits into multiple categories. So certainly I would suggest that you select the category that feels most appropriate to your work. You will have to select one category in the application. And there is not a quota or expectation for one category over the other. So 4 big buckets would be arts and education category, the opportunity category, the partnerships with individual artists or artist teams and cooperatives, and a non-501c3. One piece to note about that, if you are applying for the grant, you have to be the 501c3. So that third category, you can have a partnership with a individual artist. You can have a partnership with a non-501c3 group, but ultimately the 501c3 has to be the applicant for the grant. And then the fourth category would be the arts access category. So you'll see these descriptions again in both the guidelines and in the application itself. So you can reference that as you're thinking about your project and where it best fits. So for those of you who have submitted or looked at the project support grant before in previous years, a few recent updates to know. We are using the organization profile. If you've submitted in our operating support category in the last 2 years, we've also used that there. And I'll walk everybody through that in Submittable in just a little bit. But this, if you already did the FY25 operating support, you've already got some questions answered. And that's what we're trying to do with that organization profile. You have the opportunity to request a 2-year grant period, as I mentioned a moment ago. And then the budget form. We heard from many of our grantees in this last year that completing the budget form that existed within Submittable was difficult. So we have moved back to the way that it used to be done, which is actually you uploading an Excel spreadsheet instead of inputting into the table that exists in Submittable. I'll show everybody that and talk you through that piece as well, but that is a change from last year. And then it is possible to enter your work sample and your supplementary material information directly into a text box. You can do a cover sheet if you want to. You don't have to. We're trying to accommodate organizations who may be applying to many grants and asking for many different formats, and just give you some flexibility there. As I understand it as well, the appeals window has been extended to 30 days. That was a change last year, but you have 30 days after the panel review. Should you need to file an appeal, you have 30 days to do so. All right. So we'll talk a minute through the review process itself. So after you have submitted this grant application, it goes to the staff to review. And the staff review strictly consists of eligibility and completeness. So we are not evaluating or scoring or grading the applications at that point. At that time, the staff might be in contact with you to ask questions or get an updated document. So first, don't panic if you get an email from me. For example, when we just did operating support, somebody has uploaded their 990 and I clicked on it and it requires a password. So I reached out to that person and asked them to provide a 990 without a password. Those are things that we're going to ask you to just double check in your application, but we're going to reach out to you after it's submitted and make sure that everything's working right and is available to be reviewed. So staff will also test the links that are included, any video that's there, and make sure that everything opens correctly. And then if we received an application that was clearly ineligible, even without updating or clarifying documentation, it would be rejected without being reviewed. Same is true of applications that are incomplete. By and large, Submittable will not let you submit an application that is incomplete, but if for some reason we didn't get all the information in, your application can be rejected without review. Any eligible application will then go to the panel itself. We usually have about 5 reviewers on the panel. They're arts professionals, usually with an arts administration background. Most of them will have panel experience in the past, and we will try to vary the arts background of everyone on the panel so that we're reflective of the organizations that have applied for that grant as well. We do welcome any referrals for panelists, either for this grant or future grants. We're always looking for panelists to review, so if you know anybody local to the area and you'd like to share a name for us to consider, please let me know. I'm seeing a lot of questions now about a lot of things. Okay, I'm gonna finish one more slide of the review process, and then I will go to the questions that are in the chat while they're fresh for everybody. So a little bit more about the review process itself. When the panel does meet, the panelists themselves will meet in person. Applicant organizations are able to observe that meeting virtually, but you are just there as an observer. You're not able to provide feedback or answer questions. We do have a process for you to submit a correction form during that panel review meeting. And I'll talk more, I think I've got another slide about that in a moment. But the correction form is if you hear a panelist state something that is factually incorrect, you can point us to that correct information in your application and we can read it into the record. So the panelists score the applications. Eventually I'll get to the award determination in a second, but eventually that recommendation does go to the board of directors, and they approve the final grant awards. So the staff role really is limited to recruiting panelists, checking applications for eligibility and completeness, compiling the final scores, and facilitating the panel meetings. We do not offer any additional information during the panel meeting. Your application must stand on its own. So even though we may know something about your organization, if it is not included in your application, it's not going to be brought up in that meeting. We will take notes during that experience, and then we will share a summary of comments with you after the panel is complete. And then, of course, we'll develop that funding scenario based off the panelist scores. And then probably the thing I do most is provide technical assistance for Submittable. So happy to do that anytime. All right. I do see a lot of questions, so I'm going to pause here for a quick minute and go back to, I think, where we left off. How does the 2-year grant period work? What are the benefits of a 2-year grant period? I think that's very project specific. So if you know that in particular, if you have a certain time frame in mind and it doesn't line up right with our grant cycle, you may want to extend into a 2-year period. Maybe on an organization side, it's like a period of prep work and then a period of actually, putting the work together or presenting the work. In particular, sometimes if you're working with a school system and you're beholden to their calendar and not yours, like that might be a situation where you would want to extend into 2 years. And really the benefit is that you have more time. So if that's the time frame that your project needs, if you need 2 years to do it, you have that opportunity. I think it's a very individual feeling, perhaps. So. And then, does open to the general public mean an event must be free? No, it does not. There can be a ticketed cost to the event, but it cannot be an event that only a certain group of people could, in theory, buy tickets for. Like if you were, what's a good example? If you were only offering an arts experience to people who worked at a Nova hospital, like that is not open to the public. If you are offering an arts experience that everybody has to buy a ticket for, like that's still open to the public. So this grant is not for individual applicants, right? I think we touched on that. An individual can be served potentially through a fiscal sponsor, but you must either have fiscal sponsorship or be associated with a 501c3 nonprofit. The other potential way for an individual to get in would be that partnership category, but again, the nonprofit is the applicant for that partnership. Does the 2-year grant period allow for this project to only take place in FY26 if logistics and scheduling don't allow it to start in 25? In theory, yes, that does. I don't, my inclination would be, if you have nothing that's happening in FY25, like there's no, and that's not to say like, if you're, maybe you're doing prep work and maybe you're establishing a relationship, but there isn't necessarily a public facing event in FY25, I think that would work, right? I think if there's nothing happening in FY25, I'm not sure that would be well received by the panel. I'm not sure that the scores would go well in the panel, so that's something to consider. But again, if it's more like you're establishing parts of this program in FY25 and it's leading up to a performance or an exhibit part of the program in FY26, I think that's going to make sense to a lot of people. Yes, so a couple other quick notes to answer some questions. Somebody asking for examples of each project category. There are some on our website. I'll see if I can point those out in a minute. So I'm not going to delve into them for the sake of time. For open to the general public, would a new program that extends accessibility to a community? So Christine's question is, would a new program that extends accessibility to the disabled community qualify since it is directed to a specific population? Yeah, like yes, that would qualify. I mean, most organizations do have a population that they're hoping to engage through their project. So I think that doesn't sort of change the definition of it being open to the public. It's still open to the public. Does request for panel notes apply to all ArtsFairfax grants? Is there a format Okay, so just about the panel notes. For all of our grants, except ticket subsidy, because there's not a panel, I guess. So project support and operating support, you will receive notes when you receive information about the award. So you'll receive panel notes, like written panel notes, at the time of award notification. So if you're wondering about operating support, that we haven't notified anybody about that, it would be sometime in August that you'll have that information. Everyone will receive that. All right. I think we're caught up on questions. Thank you. These are great questions. And we will continue. All right. So it's really important as an applicant to know how we get to this award calculation. And the first thing to know would be project support grant is competitive, and not everyone who applies will receive an award. It's usually about 50% of the organizations who apply that receive an award. And on average, those organizations receive about 75% of the funds that they ask for. After the panel meeting takes place, each applicant will then have an average score from their panelist. We will put together a funding scenario that uses something called the Z-score and allows us to combine different days of panels. The Z-score is converted into a percentage, and that's the percentage of your award that we will recommend. So that score is really tied to your final award. The calculations that are made are verified ultimately by an outside accountant. As I mentioned, you might receive less than what you requested based upon the panel score. And the grants committee does make the ultimate and final approval. Grants committee and then the board of directors makes the ultimate and final approval of the funding scenario. All right. So we have pretty extensive evaluation criteria for the application itself. I will touch on each of the larger categories here. These are spelled out specifically within the grant guidelines document, and I'll make sure that we look at that on our website in a minute. That's a great place to reference this if you need to come back to it. There are 5 core criteria, and the core criteria are worth 6 points each. So this includes the quality of programs, so your ability to create mission-driven work that engages in the community. It includes aspects of risk-taking, resourcefulness, how you're supporting access and inclusion. What is the sustained resonance, impact, and value? It includes the feasibility of the project itself. So they're looking for the overall design, how it aligns with their mission. Those are the things I think the panelists focus on the most. What's your ability to plan the project, to manage it? Is it feasible within the time frame? That maybe goes back to that 1 year or 2 year questions. Like, what is the feasibility within the time frame that you've suggested? We also include community engagement. So an organization's ability to meaningfully engage with its community and achieve its mission. Additional core criteria include a category-specific criteria. So we talked about you'll have to select one of those 4 categories. And they differ for each category. There's a question that you'll receive if you've selected arts and education, or opportunity, partnerships, or arts access. And then lastly, the budget feasibility. if the budget is appropriate, if the budget makes sense, if it is on the right scale, and what kind of funding sources exist within the proposed budget. I want to mention one piece I touched on earlier. Your application must stand on its own. And it is important to remember that panelists are coming to this with a fresh set of eyes. So explain everything that you could possibly need in this application as you're writing it. Avoid acronyms, avoid any jargon, have an outside person read it if you can. All right, last page of criteria. There are 3 what we have called priority elements on the application as well. They are worth 1 point each. They include diversity, creative placemaking, and innovation. And again, for the sake of time, I am not going to read every detail of this criteria aloud. I will make sure you know where they are located on our guidelines. And I'm happy to answer questions about the specific criteria as we move forward. All right, so we had touched on some of this documentation earlier in the eligibility section. You'll be asked to upload several documents in conjunction with your application, including a treasurer's report or audit for your organization's most recently completed fiscal year. The audit's required for anyone who is above $750,000 on their operating expenses. You must also include your most recent 990. You do not have to include the schedules with that documentation. We'll also ask for a list of key project staff, board members, and any consultants with their bios. And that's going to speak to your organization's ability to carry out the project that you're proposing. In addition, there are 3 work samples that we'll ask for. You can include video, photo. It can be a performance, exhibition, lecture. We've seen lesson plans or, programming information. We've also asked for 3 supplemental materials for you to include. If you are linking to documentation that is housed online, please make sure that that is available without a login. So you don't need a login to view that. And that it's not hidden behind a paywall if it's an article or something to that effect.
I have a question if you have a moment.
Mm-hmm.
Regarding the work samples and supporting materials, if this is a brand new program that's launching, I won't have videos of performances or in-class samples. So what would I then submit for that?
Yeah, so if the program is new, but if your organization has done work that is similar to this or that this is going upon, you can share with us, what types of work you've done before, right? Okay. If everything is brand new, I think you would need to provide some work then that the staff has provided that speaks to their ability to complete the project, right? And certainly, I think there's space for you to, there's a text box where you can add some notes. So making the connection, this actually is a piece of feedback that came up in our most recent panel. Making a connection as to why you put that work into your work sample, I think is important for the panelist, especially if it's a new project, right? So this is maybe a sample of what we did last time, and we know that this is how we're going to expand it by doing X, Y, and Z. Does that answer your question?
Yes. So the organization itself is has been around for a long time, but launching a brand new program. So would it be acceptable to put in like lesson plans that will be implemented?
Mhm.
Okay, thank you so much.
Yep. I also see a quick couple questions in the chat. Is a $750,000 expense number tied to the overall organization or the specific program? It is tied to your overall organization. So the audit requirement is if your organization's annual operating expenses are over $750,000, you're required to submit an audit. If there's an organization like teetering on the edge of 750, or it's your first year just going into 750, sometimes there's like a transition year there. So let's talk about that individually. But it is tied to the organization's annual budget. And Phoebe, I'm going to come back to your question at the end because it's a little specific. We'll take a look. Also, I see one about treasurer's report. I'll show you what we've got in the application and we'll see if that answers some questions when we get there. All right. As you complete the application itself, you'll be asked to agree to the terms and conditions of the project support grants. These are a couple of the topic areas that are included. You're acknowledging the duration, your organization's eligibility, the amount of award that's there, the addendum form, which we have not touched on yet, but we'll get there in a moment, the use of funds, the requirement that you must acknowledge ArtsFairfax funding and list information on our website. It'll touch on the award announcement and payment and reporting procedures. There is required record keeping, and then in the future, some reporting requirements as well. And then there is some language about cancellation, participation in research, and advocacy requirements. All right, so we have put together a lot of resources for you as you consider applying. It's a lot to think through that application, and we're aiming to make it as easy as we can for you. The evaluation criteria is available within the guidelines itself. I'll point that out on our website. Also on our website, you can see application instructions. You can see a Word document preview of the application itself. You can see examples from FY24 applications. You can see the budget form that I touched on that you'll be required to upload. And then a preview of the activity table. We did keep the activity table as a submittable table. And then as well on the website, there is information about our communications kit and branding guide should you be selected for an award. And of course, this conversation and this slide deck will go on the website sometime next week. So you'll be able to come back and see this conversation there as well. So in addition to our documentation, we have tried to compile a list of information really relevant to Fairfax County and the local area that you might want to reference in your application. So lots here about demographics in the county, potential partners and other organizations in the county you might be working with to support your project or to offer your project to. So lots linked here. This is also available on our website, so you can see information that's shared here. So we did touch a little bit on the additional or priority criteria that is included in evaluation about serving a diverse area in Fairfax County. We do know that 3 magisterial districts are really considered underserved by the arts. So Lee, Mount Vernon, and Springfield districts are just lacking in arts organizations that are based in those areas. So those are some of the organizations that would benefit, or I'm sorry, some of the districts that benefit from that arts access category. All right. I saw 2 more questions pop in. Dave, maybe I just answered your question that came in. Dave is asking where we can find information about the cultural needs of county residents so that we can ensure we appeal to a diverse audience. So I do think some of those resources that we linked are a starting place. I also think that's a question that you can't necessarily answer just by looking at a website, and that in partly you have to go out into the community and engage to kind of get that answer, which I understand is a little bit like a chicken and the egg question, but that it would be the first resource that I would suggest. There's a couple other links on our website, I think, that potentially can help you think through like who might be a good partner organization, either that's a county-based organization or just someone else in the county. Looking at previous project support recipients may give you some ideas or a starting place there as well. All right. So 2 other pieces about after your application is submitted and what happens then. I mentioned this briefly, that there is an addendum form that you'll receive after your application has gone to the panelists for review. And the point of that addendum form is, we know the application closes on July 15th, and we know that the panel review is at the end of August. And there might be things that change about your organization or your project in between those 2 dates. For example, if you have hired a new executive director and he gets hired on August 1st, you'll be able to tell us before the panel that this is in place. If your project was about commissioning a piece of music for an upcoming concert, and on July 25th, you got the contract signed and everything's in order, and now you have a composer selected, you can give your panel the updated information about the status of that project. It's not intended to correct anything or add anything that you left out of the application. It is intended to provide anything that's changed in between July 25th and August 28th. All right, and then the other piece is the panel correction form. So if you come to the panel review via webinar, you're only able to listen. You're not able to have camera on. You're not able to talk. So if you hear something that the panel says that is a factual misstatement of the information that is included in your application, then you can submit that correction form while the panel is still taking place. I'll share these pieces again, certainly once it gets closer. I do want to say the panel correction is a tricky thing sometimes. It is not intended for you to disagree with the panel's assessment, and it can be hard to differentiate those 2 things. But it is intended so that if a panelist says, this person never talked about going into this public schools, and in your application on question 3, it says we're going into the public schools and here's where we're going to go, you can send me this form and say, we did talk about this, it's in question 3. So again, it's something we'll share when we get closer, but it is an option, so you have a way to make sure your application is reviewed. All right, last couple pieces. We do require acknowledgement of our funding. That's spelled out in our terms and condition as well. All recipients would acknowledge that for the duration of the grant. We'll talk you through that process once once it comes to be. But our grant communications kit is available online. You can kind of get a sense of what is expected of you. There will be an update for the coming year. But we have an award announcement, an award announcement, a social media post, have our logo in programs and funding, acknowledged during your work. There is an appeals process should you need to appeal. So that works. It's based upon a couple different pieces. So if the denial of your grant was based on criteria that was not included in the guidelines, if the applicant's application was denied based on the grant panel's failure to appropriately apply the guidelines, or if it was based on the failure to consider relevant evidence presented in support of the application, where the failure was both open and obvious and not merely the result of an applicant's failure to identify or present evidence, or if the grant application was denied as a direct result of an undisclosed conflict of interest between the applicant and a member of the grant panel, where otherwise the application would not have been denied, which is a lot of language to think about. But there are options for appealing. They are spelled out in the guidelines. We must receive that appeal within 30 days of the panel itself. All right. So a couple tips that we touched on a little bit already. Submittable is 85% of the time a great application management system, but sometimes it's tricky. I suggest that you consider answering the questions offline or in a Word document. We have that Word document on the website. Copy and paste into Submittable. Write as clearly as you can and do not use jargon. Many of the people who are reading your application will not know your organization. So make sure you are clear in explaining who you are and what you're doing. Check the narrative text for grammar and spelling, but you are not graded on grammar and spelling. Do not repeat information as best as you can. And then keep in mind that ArtsFairfax staff does not participate in the panel review or discussion. Be sure that when a reader has finished reviewing your application, they will know and understand your project. Double check all contact information in your organization profile is correct, especially email addresses. That is our primary form of communication. Double check the finance information in the narrative and the form. There's also a finance question within the organization profile. And I can tell you that last year, there were a few cases where the organization profile and the application the finances did not line up exactly. And that it's very hard for panelists to get past that when there's an obvious error there. Check out the model applications on our website, and please look at the online tips for Submittable, and please email me for help. I'm happy to answer questions and talk you through Submittable. You can include collaborators on Submittable as well. And I will tell you that we found one challenging situation recently with an applicant in operating support. If you have 3 or 4 people working in Submittable at the same time, especially if you are leading up to that deadline, you may actually be saving over one another in your application. So use the collaborators if you like, but be cautious about that, especially as if you're coming to the end of the submission time. Some feedback from our panelists in years past. really strong applications. They include programs that meet unique needs and interests within the community. They demonstrate clear use of demographics to support the work that they're doing and how they engage and outreach into their community. They share details on strategic priorities and connect them to the project itself. They include budgets with diverse revenue streams. And they really use that budget narrative to make sense of the project and make connections to the goals that it has. And they suggest respecting the character count, word count in the application. There is at the very bottom of each question a suggested word count. It is not a limit, and I don't think Submittable counts words as you're writing, but I do suggest having some awareness of how long your answer is getting. Panelists have to read a lot of applications, and coming across an application that is extremely long and extremely far outside that word count can be a challenge. All right, coming to the end, a review of the timeline in general. July 15th at 7 p.m. Deadline, late applications are not accepted. August 28th, 29th is when the panel meets. Sometime in very late September, early October, there would be an announcement of the award. At that time, you would receive 70% payment of the award. Then the final report for the FY25 Project Support Grant would be due August 1st, 2025. And then after that, you would receive the final 30% payment. So I'm going to stop my share. And then we will take a moment to look at our website and look at Submittable and pick up any other questions. I think I got the questions that are most recently in the chat. And so I will go to Submittable on our website. All right. All right, here we go. So you should be looking at the ArtsFairfax website right now. Again, shout out to the artist survey. Come take it if you haven't already. It's right here waiting for us. This is our main page on artsfairfax.org. If you want to find out about our grant programs, you can scroll down just a bit to see the Project Support Grant Program. And this is where all the information about the grant we've talked about today is going to be housed. Quick timeline on this side. Links to submit the application, which I'll take in just a moment. This watch information session right now currently links to last year's information session, but we'll get that updated today. And then these are the 3 buckets of information that you should be aware of. So primarily, if you need project support grant guidelines, sections from past applications, online instructions for Submittable, the question preview, the financials table, and the schedule table as well. Those are probably the big ones that you're going to spend the most time looking at. You can also check out resources, recent recipients, and again, this information session will get updated here as well. Each of these pages has a link to submit your application, which will take you to our Submittable site that looks like this. There are many applications currently available on the submittable website. So first off, if you have already completed an FY25 operating support grant, when you come here, you will see the organization profile will look like mine right here. It's grayed out. It says I've already submitted in this category and I can't do it again. So I'm not going to look at that one today. If you did not submit an FY25 operating support grant, you will be able to click on this one and start with your organization profile. So we'll skip that one for now. But again, if this is your first grant of FY25, start here, complete this form, and then we'll move to the project support grant. You can find a link to our guidelines here. That'll take us back to the website we were just looking at. And then you can hit submit. Again, guidelines linked here. You will first receive these questions that we talked about at the very beginning of this conversation, all the eligibility questions. The organization has a physical address within the record, physical address of record within the boundaries of Fairfax County, City of Falls Church, or City of Fairfax. And again, we talked about that 102 form. So we're looking for the physical address on the 102 form. We're asking about your core mission as an arts discipline. If you hold 501c3 status, you have regular activity in 4 months of the year or 120 days, in compliance with all state laws. In this question, my organization received line item funding from the state of Virginia in FY22, directly supports a government program, or is a school of or Department of Mason you know to be eligible for this grant. You're presenting 51% of your public artistic activities in the county or cities. You have one of these three. You have prepared financial statements or the audit. You've submitted all your reports. Thank you very much. And your organization lists events on our website. So this is strictly the eligibility that pops up first. You select next, and then you get to the application. So again, at the top of the page, you can always get back to the guidelines if you need to reference them. You can also manage your collaborators right here. That's where you can add a second person to work on this application. So first question is, are you applying with a fiscal sponsor? So if I say yes, I get a couple more questions, more information about the process that you can work through. I'm going to say no for today. And then we hop into the application itself. So basic contact information, information about whether or not you've applied with us in the past. This organization profile is where you will upload that first form that you created in the organization profile itself. So there are links down here to get you back there if that's not something that you've done before, and directions to download that within Submittable as well. So again, some basic information about organization, about the project itself. Yeah. And then as we continue, come into questions that are project specific, suggested word count that exists below each question. So just keep an eye on that. We've included the project categories again here for you to reference, so you can ensure you're selecting the one that you like, and then you're asked to pick one of the categories. I made a note in this application that when you select a category here, it changes the question that appears in question 3. If you start working on your application and come back and change this category, you may lose the information that you put into question 3. but the rest of the application should remain just fine. All right, so we'll ask you to provide information about where the project is taking place, the approximate time frame. Again, it's mentioned here that you can use a 2-year time frame if you like. And then we come into the project schedule, which, as I mentioned, it's still a submittable table here. Uploading staff bios, and we go more into the narrative. Again, please check the word count if you are able to. You will not see question 3 here unless you have selected a category above. So if you were to skip this question, you would not see question 3 yet. Submittable will not let you submit this until you have selected that. So we'll continue. We do eventually come to the budget file. And again, this year we have made this an upload. So there's a link in the text here that will take you back to our webpage where you can download the budget file and complete it. It's an Excel spreadsheet. You can only edit a specific number of cells on that Excel sheet. And it should be totaling the formulas automatically as you're doing that. The space for that budget narrative that we talked about, more context for what you should include in this budget narrative, and then how you would adjust the project if it were not fully funded. There had been a couple questions in the chat earlier too about 990s and treasurer's report. So in each of these upload sections, we've added some examples, some clarification. Part of the reason that this is still a little bit vague is that we want organizations to be able to share what they have and not go out of their way to create something new and unique for us. So if you're wondering about your treasurer's report or your audit and what that needs to look like, let's talk one-on-one so that we can find something that, again, hopefully is not a lot of extra work for your organization. It's something that's already out there. But there is some definition here if you need it. And then again, space for you to upload, to provide notes about your work samples. We kind of touched on that in one of the earlier questions, and space for you to upload them. I think one of the things I left off, if you are providing videos, either with a link or uploading videos, if they are long videos, please make sure to provide a timestamp if there is a specific piece you want the panelists to review. You really cannot review more than 5 minutes total of videos. And then, of course, lastly, there's a section for you to add anything you would like the panel to know about this project. A couple things to just take your mind back and make sure you included all these pieces in the application. And then you're asked to have a signature page of the chief admin, the board member, and the project coordinator itself. Finally, you'll check off the terms of use. You can view the terms of use here as well. You have to kind of scroll up to get to the very beginning. And then once your application is complete, you can submit. Make sure it takes you, it should come off this page when you actually have submitted the application. If you are in submittable and you leave this tab open for a day or so and then come back to it, it might have trouble connecting. So I would strongly suggest, as you're working on your application, come down here and save your draft, close the window, log out, come back in. If you leave it open, sometimes it's just tricky, or it maybe doesn't quite save right. So that is the application and submittable itself. So I'm gonna stop share. I see a couple of, yeah, so a couple of questions, and then we have about 10 more minutes for any other questions that you want to have. So I'm going to go back to Ruth, the audit question on the eligibility page. I believe it was just, I don't know if I can get back on the page that I'm on, but I think it says something like, my organization either has an audit or a treasurer's report. Like if we're over 750, we have an audit or we have a treasurer's report. So you would say yes to that question. But if you have any concerns about that question, just reach out to me specifically. I mentioned a Word document template of the submittable application. Yeah, so Joe is asking about the Word document version of the application, and that is on our website. So it doesn't explicitly say Word document. It says application question preview. So let me just share that one more time so we can make sure it's we're looking at the website, right? Yes. Okay. All right. So this is we're on this, if you're on our project support page, and you come down here to the guidelines and application, you will see the downloads section includes the application question preview. That's the Word document that you can download. That's the application. All right. I think those are all the questions. I think I answered the questions that are here. So last thing I want to add before we sign off, please come to me with questions sooner rather than later. There is no dumb question at all. I answered lots of questions. I answer lots of questions, even when you think we talked about it, but you don't remember where that document is. There's a lot of documents here too. So please email me if you just need help finding something. I'm happy to email, phone call, Teams, whatever works best for you. After today's conversation, we will put this recording on the website, hopefully today or actually, no, maybe not tomorrow, maybe early next week. It will go up on the website and you'll get another email from me. And then the application closes on July 15th at 7 p.m. Are there any other questions? All right. I'm here for another couple minutes. I don't think I missed anyone's question in the chat. If I missed you, I'm very sorry. Please hang on or send me a message again. But I'm happy to hang here for a minute or two if you like, and thank you all for joining us today.